Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
About the same as you.
Oh my gosh. These mornings are like killer, right? By
Yeah,
11 o'clock, I feel like I've been through, I don't even know.
I know. It's coffee.
Yeah, coffee. I know. I didn't even have time to get another coffee. So thank you so much for coming on my show. I really enjoyed when we were joint chatting in a way at our, panel that we did with Stella Erasmus. So that was fun. Would you mind holding up your book if you have a copy and telling everybody what it's about, please? It's a
Sure.
little blurry. Maybe it's my connection. I know.
It's called Raising a Screen Smart Kid, Embrace the Good and Avoid the Bad in the Digital Age. And I wrote it because, in addition to being a blogger and a social media person, I'm also a professor of public health at George Mason University. And it's an interesting place to be when you have kids that are old enough to want to be online and have phones and social media accounts, and you also work in social media, and you don't want to be a hypocrite by limiting them. But it is a whole new world raising kids in this environment, and I'm a pretty evidence-based person, and I wanted to take the opportunity to look at what the research said about how this is impacting our kids' well-being and what are realistic and reasonable limits. And so I looked at 375 sources, most of them peer-reviewed studies, really digging in deep to see what we know and what we don't about how screen time and social media impact our kids, and what we do about it as parents.
Well, I'm particularly interested in this, not just because of the societal impact and all the rest, but selfishly, I feel like during this pandemic, and I don't know about you, but I have sort of taken off the rules of screens almost entirely, and I have a lot of guilt associated with that. I know that screens do some good things too, but what does your research say about, flooding the screen time during, like particular points of time? Like, is it okay if you just let them go at it for like a vacation and then you go back to normal limits, or what? Tell me, give me some goods here.
Well, I mean, I wasn't prepared for a 2 to 3 month quarantine when I wrote the book in 2018, 2019. So um, this obviously are extenuating circumstances, and we're all sheltering in place. Obviously, the amount of screen time that we are having as a society, both with parents and kids, it's much higher. Um, and that's unavoidable. I mean, we are totally dependent on technology in my house to get groceries, to work, to go to school. And I think it kind of starts with letting go of that guilt and just, it is what it is, right? And
Yeah.
also understanding that, a very smart woman I know named Dr. Deborah Gilboa, in an interview with me, talked about how screen time is like nutrition, right? And it sort of varies between, on the one side, you have like broccoli, and on the other side, you have like rat poison, right? So not all screen time is the same. Your kid being engaged in a Zoom lesson with their teacher in their class is entirely different than your kid just, playing Toka for 7 hours, right? Or just like scrolling through TikTok or Snapchat, just feeling increasingly bad about themselves because they don't look like the influencers that they're seeing, or because you are a cruel monster of a parent and you are making them social distance while they are watching all of their friends get together, right? So I think the best way to start right now under our current circumstances is to really just change your thinking about what screen time is, right? There's good stuff and there's bad stuff and there's stuff in between. And as far as the good stuff goes, I'm not really sure there's any point in putting too many limits on it unless you're seeing behavior from your kids that is concerning to you, right? So if they're spending a lot of time FaceTiming friends, spending time with friends, family, if you guys are co-watching or co-viewing or co-playing, um, again, unless there is behavior associated with that that's sending your spidey senses off, I don't know that you need to limit that. Like if they're reading a lot on their Kindles, where's the problem? right?
I thought that part of it was the way that we interacted with the screens themselves, right? And like what it does to our brains and the colors and how you get distracted, how it that the screens themselves will make you unable to focus for long periods of time. I thought it was actually like, and of course
Oh,
we're having this conversation on screens now, so
yeah, and
uh,
there is absolutely a neurological response, and I do think that you, I mean, it's we try and have the policy in our family that we power down before bedtime, both because the blue light from the screen can disrupt your circadian rhythm, so it's harder to fall asleep if you are trying to wean yourself off of a device. Try putting it away early. The other thing you can do is change the light settings so that you eliminate the blue light after a certain time of day. Um, and absolutely, I mean, if you are kind of training your brain to respond to almost instant gratification, it worsens the ability to manage boredom when you put the screen down. And I know we've all seen that with our kids when we try and get them to stop doing something that they want to be doing, particularly if it's like a digital activity, right? It's a highly stimulating, preferred experience, right? That's giving their brain lots of dopamine hits and it's great. And then you remove that and they react, right? Generally pretty badly.
yeah.
Um, Now, in some cases, that could be a behavioral sign that you need to be paying attention to. In other cases, it's just you're telling a brain that's being highly stimulated with something that's making it feel good to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And, the reaction to that neurologically is going to be like, oh, what's that? So you
Yeah.
have to either give them a little space and time to adjust to the next thing or make that next thing something that's engaging, right? So something that's going to be stimulating. So it could be running, it could be physical activity, it could be um, taking a shower, washing your face. I mean, something that is genuinely going to kind of help them reset. Playing an instrument, drawing. If you have a pet, engaging with your pet. Um, and especially for younger immature brains, like that reset function is really hard. Although I will say it's not limited to digital stuff. I mean, if you ever try and drag a toddler off a playground before they're ready and they go boneless and they scream, and
Yeah.
kind of the same thing. It's the same function.
I have a 5-year-old who has the most trouble transitioning. And now I've realized like anytime I'm gonna say, okay, it's over, I'm just gonna give it 5 or 10 minutes of tantruming. I'm just gonna like in my head, if we want to have dinner in 15 minutes, then I'm backing it up. Like I need to allow for the tantrum time and just if it's less than that, I can be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I really get it because I really have a tendency to hyper focus on what I'm working on. And when you try and like jog me out of my hyper focus, I am very resistant to it.
Hmm.
Um, with a younger kid, with a 5-year-old, something I would recommend is like an egg timer or a countdown timer so they can physically see the time counting down. If I'm deeply engaged in something, like I can't tell you the number of like meals I've ruined and kettles I've burnt out because I put it on the stove and I think, oh, 5 minutes. And then I get back into what I'm doing. And
Totally.
20 minutes later, something's on fire on my stove. So I have empathy for kids, especially when they're really engaged in something and you tell them to stop. Five
Yep.
minutes doesn't mean anything to them. But if you can
Exactly.
put the timer on top of the television or next to the iPad, then that becomes something more visually concrete for them. And it also makes it less about you and makes it
Hmm.
more about that external reminder.
I
Um,
also, I don't know if you've found this too, like the thing that's worked the best is you're absolutely right with the empathy because, if you want to, like, I just started watching the new Normal People show based on Sally Rooney's book on Hulu. Have you watched it? It's so
I,
good. Oh my gosh. But I was thinking as I was watching it with my husband the other night, if somebody walked in and was like, you're done right now, turn it off, it's time, go take a shower. I'd be like, what?
yeah, I
No,
know.
thanks. I don't want to take a shower. I'm in the middle of a show.
I'm
So
trying
I
to
try
get
to,
work done. Don't interrupt me.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think at least with my little guy, sometimes just literally like putting him on my lap and watching the last few minutes of him and like laughing with him and and like seeing what he's into. Oh, the show somebody's asking what show, Normal People. by Sally Rooney, which was a book. It has just been made into a show on Hulu. So I just started watching it. And anyway, someone's
Is this
asking, but it
show
was really
about
good.
neurodiversity?
What's that?
Is the show about neurodiversity?
No, it's about a love affair in high school.
Oh, I've seen the ads for that. It looks fantastic.
It's really good.
It looks
It's
really steamy.
it's really good. And now I'm like, I should try to interview her. But anyway, I haven't read the book, I have to say, but the show is so good. Anyway, let me get away from the show.
Okay.
But my only point is sometimes with the screen time, you have to imagine that like your kid is basically watching Sally Rooney's new Hulu series and be as empathetic and like watch the end and be like, oh, that's so funny. Now let's go do this next thing together. That's the only thing I found that eases the tantruming. So
Yeah, I think that that's such a good way to approach it. You know, those transitions are really, they're
yeah.
hard, and they're hard for littles especially, and they're hard for like kids that have ADHD brains or are, you know, not typically developing. Those transitions are harder for them too.
Yeah.
So it's important just to be aware of that and kind of find a workaround that is appropriate for your individual kid.
So what made you want to write this book? Like why did screen time become, I know you're public health and all the rest, but like what made you say, okay, yes, I'm a blogger, but now I'm going to commit myself to this one topic. Tell me about it.
Well, I have this precious, beautiful, lovely, perfect, adorable children who, you know, rudely and unkindly continue to grow up. And they, you know, they wanted a Snapchat and they wanted an Instagram and they wanted an iPhone. And I literally get paid to overshare on Facebook. So it's a hard thing. And there's just not a lot of great data out there. I mean, we're so over informed right now as parents about what we should be doing. And I started to get this weird deja vu when my oldest went to middle school, where parents would be like, did you let your kid get Snapchat? And it was almost like, are you breastfeeding?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the same, like there's an agenda behind that question, right? And when mostly the age of use on the terms of agreement for social media apps and platforms are 13, but I mean millions and millions of kids are using these apps younger than that. So if you are one of the parents who's pretty firm on making them wait, it can feel really isolating. And the bottom line is there is a social cost for your child by making them wait. And I really had to face this tough decision. Like, do I make my kid wait and watch her essentially be kind of isolated from a big group of her peers because she's not able to communicate with them on their preferred mode of getting together and talking and sharing information? I mean, I don't think it was particularly personal. That's just how they communicate, you know, and she wasn't a part of that. She didn't know the language, she didn't have access to it. But it also saved that particular kid from seeing things before they were ready to see them.
Very true.
And it's just, it's a difficult situation to be in. It's hard to know how to manage it. I think a lot of parents have just kind of decided to jump on TikTok or allow those things to happen during quarantine so their kids can still feel connected socially. And I totally get it. I totally get it. Like, I'm not judging anyone who makes different decisions than I do. I don't even know you. I don't know you, kid, you know? If that works for you, that's great, as long as it's an informed decision that you're making. I think the worst thing we can do is hand an 11-year-old a phone and a Snapchat and an Instagram and then just walk away and go back to business. Like, we have to know how those apps work. We have to know who they're interacting with online. We have to be as engaged with them as we can be in learning how to use the technology and, you know, to really hone their sense of what's okay and what's not and what's potentially dangerous.
Very true. Speaking of your own situations on social media and technology, can you please tell me this story of being Zoom bombed in the FBI and all the rest? What happened?
So last week I was doing a talk about parenting during this pandemic with a local moms group in Northern Virginia, Vienna Moms, and they're awesome. They're a group of 800 parents We also had a local independent bookstore called Bard's Alley, which is an amazing bookstore that was on board supporting the event. And then Megan Leahy, who is an author, her book is coming out this summer, and she's also the parenting columnist for the Washington Post. So Megan and I were just talking about parenting during a pandemic, and it was on Zoom. I was hosting the meeting, and we wanted to make the conversation available after it was over for people who hadn't been able to join us. So I set the Zoom to record and to download onto my laptop. And I was overly dependent upon Zoom's encryption and security. We did not require passwords because it was really widely advertised. And if you're sending an email out to 800 people and you're sending the password out to them, yeah. Right? Like, how secure is that? 40 minutes into the meeting, the screen was taken over with, well, we weren't sure what it was at first. It was child pornography.
No.
I have now, which I now refer to as child sexual abuse material, after collaborating and cooperating with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, because there was nothing about it that wasn't completely awful and horrifying. And it came up, and I thought maybe someone's toddler had wandered into the frame, and it took over the meeting. Like, I didn't know what was happening. By the time I figured out what I was seeing, my instinct was to slam the laptop closed, but then I was hosting the meeting. So I'm like frantically clicking to end the meeting and missing buttons because I was freaking out. And then the file processed and downloaded onto my laptop. And it
Oh, no.
Yeah. I mean, it is and should be a federal offense to have that material. And it was on my laptop. I reached out to all of the people on the call. I reopened the meeting to quickly apologize and let them know what happened. 5 minutes in, it happened again. So we shut it down. I then emailed Zoom security and CC'd law enforcement and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And I'm fortunate that I have a pre-existing relationship with NCMEC, because I interviewed them for the book talking about internet safety. And I have an enormous amount of respect for the work that they do. Even more so now, having seen those images, which if I could Men in Black my brain, I would, because I can never unsee what I saw. And it was awful. My husband is a former federal law enforcement officer, official. And so I was able to, I knew to contact them immediately and to CC them on the initial email to Zoom. And Zoom has been very responsive, and they take it very seriously. I was contacted by the FBI a couple days later, because again, it is a federal thing. Fully cooperated with them. They were fantastic. They came to my house.
Oh my gosh.
My evidence, my computer, upon which I've written 2 books and used for 7 years, is now evidence and in the hands of federal law enforcement. And I'm not sure if and when I'll ever see it again. I gave them access to my Zoom account, obviously, because they wanted to have full ability to look at everything. And I honestly am willing to do whatever it takes for them to identify both the hackers and hopefully the people behind that video. And if there's any way to provide resources or safety to the victim in that video, I hope that they can do it. So both the groups that were involved in the meeting, setting it up to talk about parenting, and NCMEC and the FBI, we're all working on it. And it's just about 10 minutes before it happened, I started saying something like, if all of us are letting our kids be online without really closely supervising them, I think maybe we're all getting a little more complacent about it. I know that I am. But it's really important that you talk to them about dangerous images, explicit images, pornography, because even kids who don't want to see it or aren't looking for it, it can find them. And so we want to teach them, how to react, what to do, who to tell, and all that stuff. And 10 minutes later, we got bombed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I guess the FBI is you know, they're taking it very seriously because it is happening more and more and more and more and more, and with increasing frequency. Like the more we use these resources, the more hackers and whoever are finding a way in. I'm not really sure what purpose is served by doing this, other than to just be horrible. But so
Wow.
that's my story. And I checked with the investigation before speaking to you. Like I'm allowed to talk about it. It's been not great. And I would strongly encourage everyone who's using programs that allow video sharing, use every single security measure that they have. Is updating their encryption iteration today. Zoom email about it this morning. So
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. I'm so sorry that that happened to you, and it sounds awful. I thank you for sharing it as sort of a warning flag to the rest of us. And, um, you know, you were probably the best person for it to happen to because you have a platform to spread the word and make the rest of us aware. You know, it's like so ironic. You have this whole book about
yeah,
screens and screen safety, and you're like this expert. And then look what happened. So it can happen to you. It can happen to anybody.
it happen to anyone.
So
And I think it's also just it's such a wake up call too, because it's so easy to become complacent. I mean, one of the things I write about in the book is that like when it comes to screen time generally and social media use in particular, more is generally worse, and excessively more is just not good for your well-being, right? And in terms of your kids encountering risks online, it's the same thing. Like the more the greater the exposure, the greater the risk. So like the more time that you spend online, even if they're not doing anything wrong, right? It increases the risk that they could come across something that's either not good for them or have them, you know, be a random victim of a Zoom bomb or whatever.
right.
So it's just really important not to get complacent. I'm not saying that we have to be on top of every single detail, because I mean it's just not possible. But you know, let my experience hopefully serve as a as a warning to others that I'm glad it happened to me. If it had happened to one of my kids, I just don't know how they would have handled it.
No. Yeah. Me neither. I don't, I mean, they, yeah. Hopefully they
Yeah,
would have
I
come to
mean, and
us,
it
but
happened to church groups and libraries and school meetings, and it's just,
yeah, not good.
yeah.
So let's get back to your book just for 2 seconds. So your book is out there. You have all this amazing stuff. What what next? What would you like to write next? Do you want to write another book? Do you see any other things from your job perspective that you feel like you need to dig deeper into and help the rest of us with? Like what's coming next for you?
Well, I am actually finished another manuscript that I am in the process of sort of querying right now, but I think I'm kind of done writing nonfiction per se. And I'm having the experience that a lot of other bloggers have, is that when our kids get older, it becomes really problematic to write about them. And I've only done so in pretty general terms over the past 7 years, maybe 5 years. And I am not a blogger who's ever like shared their images or their names. And I've tried to respect their privacy, but the older they get, the more they just don't want me writing about pretty much anything
Yeah.
that has to do with them. When this book came out, my daughter was like, "Yeah, my mom has the book coming out," and her friends were like, "Oh, that's awesome!" And she's like, "Yeah, it's about teenagers and social media," and they were like, "Oh, I'm sorry." So I think I definitely want to move into fiction. I really love all that I learned in terms of the sort of social psychology and behavioral decision making um, that I learned in the research for this book, and I'm kind of trying to apply that to character development. So I do have that coming up, and I'm continuing to just do little short things here and there through my blog and through the other publications that I've worked with, and mostly websites.
That's great.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you can write through this time? Like, do you feel like Like, do you want to sit down and write a whole thing about the Zoom bomb experience? Like, is that where your head's at, or are you more like not there?
I like don't want to write about that because I'm so like it's so dark.
Hmm.
The images that I saw are just so dark, and I can't. I'm still having a little trouble processing what I saw. I mean, it's like humanity. There is a small proportion of humanity that's just terrible, and it's really easy when you have a nice family and a roof over your head and you love your children to like ignore that reality. And it was a reminder that there are monsters out there. There are really bad people out there, and I'm like
Yeah.
upset about it still.
This is like none of my business, but I feel like you should see like a counselor for
Oh,
PTSD or
yeah,
something. Honestly.
I'm lucky because, like you said, it's really good that it happened to me. Like I've had plenty of therapy. I have a good therapist. So I'm definitely working on it. I'm just like not there
Yeah,
yet.
not ready. Yeah, don't. So, okay, we'll steer clear. Forget I said anything. What about reading? Are you doing any reading these days? Have you read anything good?
I am okay. So I just reread Persuasion.
Mm, good for you.
Both, both like really good, and then there are parts that I was like, did Anne Elliot just really say that? And then I really like romance novels. And
Great.
so three of them came out this week from authors that I really like: L.J. Shen, Helena Hunting, and Serena Bowen. So
Awesome.
that's gonna keep me pretty busy till I finish them.
That's great.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
I kickstarted everything with NaNoWriMo. So the last time, I mean, when what it really got me into it is just it's really butt in chair, like head in the game, butt in the chair, as the hashtag I'm writing ladies talk about. Like, and NaNoWriMo is a great way to do that. And I think I wrote 90,000 words in 6 weeks.
Wow.
You just have to force yourself to do it. Like you just have to force yourself to do it. And you can, there's so many things out there. I would also suggest getting an accountability buddy to force yourself to write every day, even if they're garbage words, just get them out.
Hmm.
I had a good friend who really was just checking in with me, making sure I was doing, setting goals and getting them done. And I did the same for her. And that was incredibly helpful. I'm someone who needs pushes.
Yeah. Sounds good. Well, thank you for coming on. I'm so sorry. Thank you for sharing your experience.
Yeah,
I'm
everybody use
sorry
that.
it happened, but thank you for getting the word out, and we'll all be more careful and require passwords and be more, hovering a little bit more over the kids' stuff. So anyway, and thank you for your great book. Hold it up one more time for the people at home who might have missed the beginning, Raising a Screen Smart Kid. Or yeah, which is basically like raising a smart kid because everybody's on screen. So, well, anyway, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.